Hello and welcome to Friday Night Live, well, not so live, in Mrs. Rogers' Stamperhood. My name is Sharon Rogers and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator from Wells, Maine in the United States. And generally I come to you with a live project every Friday night at 7:30. But sometimes, like tonight, I'm away and can't be here live, so I pre-record something. And so you're watching something that was pre-recorded a couple days ago, and I hope you enjoy it. It's a simple card, but I think you're gonna find that its simplicity is absolutely beautiful. Let's get started. There's no snow in the forecast for Wells in the very near future. However, I'm going to create a nice snowy scene because that makes my snow-loving heart happy. It's gonna be a pretty simple scene. I'm going to take my embossing buddy from my Embossing Editions toolkit and run that over a piece of crumb cake cardstock that measures 5 inches by 3 3/4. I'll bring in my Versamark pad and I'll get my white embossing powder out and have it handy. I'm going to bring in 2 stamps. I'm going to bring in the duplex stamp and then the 2-story house stamp. Get some blocks to go with those. We're going to ink that up in our Versamark. And let's stamp that somewhat down here, and then we'll ink the other one up. And we'll put that one over here. Now we all know that good fences make good neighbors, but if we don't have a fence, let's use a tree. And then one more thing, I'm going to put in some snow. That will complete our lovely snowy scene. So Versamark stays wet. We're just going to stamp some randomly. Well, I guess it's not so random in here. Fill up our little sky. And now we are ready to emboss. Let's get an embossing tray out. Not touching the front of our cardstock if we can help it. Let's put this right in our tray and pour on some powder. And I usually just dump it all on, and now it's all on there, but it's not all covered. And bring in my little reverse tweezers here and just kind of slide that over, and that way it'll cover everything up. And then I'll just tap 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 it a little bit, get some of that excess off. Where I tapped it over here, we've got a pretty big blotch. Let's take that off. All right. Let's set this aside for just a moment and let's heat this. Now I'm gonna pick this up. Probably should be using my reverse tweezers, but this is a large enough piece, so I'm not gonna burn my hands. I'm gonna hold it over and just try to emboss this right side, and you can see that the white is getting bright, which means that powder has melted. So once that powder melts, you move along to the next section. Let's rotate and do the other side. we go. Isn't white on crumb cake pretty? Well, let's pour our embossing powder right back into our jar. Embossing powder goes a long way. It looks like such a tiny jar, and it is a small jar, but it does last quite a bit. All right, let's set this aside. Set that aside for just a little bit. I'm now going to bring in a blender pen and my craft white ink refill. I'm bringing a little clear block too. I'm just going to put a little bit of ink right there. And now let's just pick up a little bit of the ink, and where there's snow on the rooftops, I'm going to color it in. Get a little bit of snow over on the window boxes and on this overhang here. So it's easy to color. The embossing helps you to stay within the lines, because you know you'll feel it when you get right up next to the lines. All right, and just a little bit more down here. So this is kind of like the best of both worlds. There's coloring, and yet there's not really coloring, if you know what I mean. I mean, we're not really doing a lot of coloring, are we? That's a big snowbank right in front of that house. I remember, and I don't remember how long ago it was, but it was probably close to 10 years, I think. We had a lot of snow. And outside of my office at church, I lived kind of, my office was sort of in a corner, of an inside corner. So where two areas of the roof met, kind of came down as an angle, and things just like to gather in there. And my window was almost, which was a very tall window, was almost completely covered. It was fantastic. I loved it. I thought it was so cool. And you'll notice, like, I'm not worried that all of it's not colored in down here. I'm just getting most of it. We can add a little bit to the trees, show where the snow is kind of collecting, wherever you think that is. All right. Now, because I can let that set for just a minute, or I can hit it with a heat tool just briefly, maybe even on the lower setting, because I don't want to melt that embossing powder into the cardstock. But I do want to dry this white ink a little bit, especially in the places where it's a little bit heavier. So the white ink is very similar to Versamark. In fact, you could have stamped in a white pad and then embossed in white for the same effect. And then just color again in white. White is one of those inks that I find people don't use a whole lot. And it really is a fabulous, fabulous ink. There's this one little spot over here that's got quite a bit. In fact, I'm going to cheat and get it off a little bit. There we go. Now, to clean your blender pen, All you're going to do is find a scrap piece of paper and rub it until it's clear. I designate one of my blender pens for my white ink. That way it's not really a bother if it stays on there. Just put the cap on, and I have it in a special spot in my holder so I know which one it is. I have this base of crumb cake, and so look, we have a tone on tone here. Now what we can do is we can provide a little accent, or we can keep it just like it is. Let's see what an accent would look like. I happen to like Night of Navy with craft or crumb cake and white. I think that makes a really pretty scene. So we have something that looks like that. Or what we can do is we can do this, and we can have a sentiment that kind of comes down here if we want that. All sorts of options. I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and mount this on my Night of Navy. I have such a bad habit of leaving my glue not quite closed on my desk. It tends to clog up that nozzle. Put that right here. This would not be a hard card to mass produce. I mean, I guess you got some coloring to do here. You could use a water painter brush and just dilute the ink a little bit more, and you could get a little bit more painty with it if you wanted to. I thought there were lots of little spots in here. That's why I chose to do the blender pen instead. Now let's go ahead and put this up on dimensionals. Pull in some dimensionals. And of course, this doesn't have to be a Christmas card, but it could be. Depends on what the sentiment is that you put on here. But that's certainly a nice winter card too. Because even though there's no snow in the forecast, I'm pretty sure there's some coming sometime. All right, now let's just go ahead and put on a sentiment here, a little sentiment layer. All right, I have a piece of basic white scrap. It's about 1 1/4 inches wide. The length I'm going to alter. Bringing in a piece, or my Night of Navy ink pad, and this is the Season's Greetings message from Everyday Greetings. Nope, not Everyday Greetings. It's from Greetings of the Season. And I'll take my paper snips, and actually I'll cut down the end a little bit first, and then I'm going to snip up what I think is about the center, and then cut from the point to that line so we get a little banner edge here. And we can put that right up here. And all we really need is some twine. And there happens to be in this Natural Tones linen thread package that was part of the Nests of Winter suite, happens to be some Night of Navy twine. Let's wrap this around a couple times. And one more time, I guess. I'll tie that into a bow. All right, let's let's fiddle with the ends. Get that bow looking nice. There we go. And we can trim the ends a bit. We don't need them that long. Bring back our dimensionals. And let's anchor this down here with some dimensionals. Now you could, if you had the twine over more, it would be fine just putting the dimensionals out here in this white space. But what you don't want to do is put your dimensionals here so that the twine is able to fall off. You don't want that. Let's just put that right there. And so a pretty simple card. Now really, wasn't that a pretty simple card to create? And yet the white on crumb cake is just, it's so classy and striking. So I hope that you will take this idea and run with it. I do love the Yuletide Village stamp set for this. And if you, like me, live in a northern climate, you're gonna get much more use out of it than just at Christmas time because we've got lots of snow coming. Anyway, I hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and I will see you on Sunday for the 9th Sunday of Christmas, right here on my YouTube channel. See you then. Have a great weekend.